Are aspect ratios just technical specs based on the equipment you use, or can they be something more? Well, in a recent project, the framing and the composition of my shot pushed me to change my aspect ratio on set, revealing that maybe aspect ratio, when used intentionally, can be a creative tool, one that shapes the viewer's experience, guides attention, and triggers emotion, just like lighting or sound design. Let's dive right in. I've shot projects in different aspect ratios before, but those decisions were typically made in pre-production, often to give a piece a more cinematic feel. When I'm shooting corporate film though, aspect ratio isn't something I really think about, especially on set. Just like frame rate, it's kind of set, 16:9 is the default. But on this specific shoot, something happened. When we first got into this room, there's a lot of options for us to shoot into, which is unusual. Like typically I go into a normal office building with a conference room or whatever, and I'm pretty limited in what I can use. But this room was great. There was a lot of options for me to film in. I have to shoot 5 interviews in that space. I don't have a lot of time, so I decided to do 2 different setups. I composed my frame. I did all the lighting, set everything up based off of 16:9 like I normally do. But for some reason, when looking at the monitor, even before we placed the subject in, I wanted to crop top and bottom, and I literally used to I would put my arm and be like, oh, I wonder what it looks like in a wider frame. So you can see here on my monitor, I set my 2.39 frame guide just to kind of take a look at the frame in widescreen format. And I really liked it. And it was kind of weird, like it's not something that I've ever done on set off the cuff where I'm like looking at the monitor and be like, you know what, I think this would look better if it was widescreen. And so I still wasn't sure about it, but the beauty is I'm still recording 16:9 in camera. There's no decisions here that are being made that cannot be reversed. We brought the interviewee in, sent him in, and shot like we normally would, knowing that in post-production, I can then crop what I need to crop. I can adjust the frame. I shoot everything in 4K, but deliver everything in 1080p, so it gives me room to reframe if I need to. And so I felt pretty comfortable about the decisions to keep the guide on my monitor and then make a decision later in post-production. Now, I haven't fully edited this piece yet. I just pulled some elements just for us to look at. So here's the 16:9 shot. There's a lot of things that I love here. There's, again, nothing wrong with this aspect ratio. The one thing I'm not sure about is this lamp. We talked about it on set. There was nothing we could do as far as removing it physically on set, and positioning my subject differently would have compromised what I liked about the framing. So we framed our subject in a way so that they are under that light. So if I need to remove that in post-production, I can easily mask it and get rid of it. So that's something I'll look into. Actually, on this frame here, there have already been elements that I've removed in post-production. If we looked at the BTS shots of the setup, like this one, for example, you'll notice that we have this putting green in the background. And we had talked about that with my client, making sure we didn't want to show that in the frame. And so I removed that in the actual shot, same as those outlets on the wall, which are reflected on the counter. If you look at the shot I just showed you, those are gone. The outlets are gone and the putting green is gone. And I simply use AI to regenerate those 2 little sections that I laid on top and remove those elements. So I may do the same thing with that lamp, depending on how the piece feel. But I think what was important for me here when I first composed this shot was having this counter as a foreground element made my subject more comfortable. They could just put their arm on the counter and it just helped them look more casual. And so I like that. And I really like the reflection on the counter. I actually wish I could pull back even more and see the entire reflection. I think that could have been an interesting element. It just, at that point, I would have seen the side of the counter, which I didn't want to do. So it didn't work that way. when we look at the 2.39 aspect ratio, we kind of lose some of that reflection, which is the bummer. Now, again, I'm shooting in 4K, so I could use the same aspect ratio and bring it down a little bit. Now, it's going to raise my subject higher on the frame, which I'm not sure I'm super excited about, but I'll look at that and see if that's a better fit for what I'm trying to achieve. I also don't want to completely lose those pennant lights. It's something that I feel adds something to the frame. So, again, that's the flexibility of shooting in 4K and delivering in 1080p. But I think what's happening here is all the elements in the frame are going horizontal. They're going this way. And now we have straight lines back here and here. But to me, the frame is pushing towards the depth of the frame, which is pushing right. And I think that's why this white screen is working for me. It's adding to this horizontal push. I think for me, it was really the first time that it was reversed. I didn't thought about my aspect ratio in pre-production and set my guides before composing the shot. It was really the lines and the way I framed this shot that forced me to look at, should I crop this image? In the past, I've shot 2.39 aspect ratio before, again, to bring more of a cinematic feel. So we know that aspect ratio or certain aspect ratio communicate emotion. They communicate something. They make your piece feel more, fill in the blank, sophisticated, higher end production, whatever. And I think that's real. I think that works. I think it does have that tendency of making viewers react differently because the aspect ratio is different. But I never seen it happen on set without without making that decision ahead of time, and to see that the framing itself landed itself to saying remove top and bottom, remove some of the negative space. I thought was interesting. For the next setup, we simply reversed it. We still used the same counter space, and we reversed it. Instead of shooting towards that back corner, we went and shot towards this corner. And it works the same way. This is the 16:9. We kept some of the pennant lights in, but when you go to the 2.39 shot, we have a very similar frame where the pennant lights are still there. We have less competing vertical lines. We still have the horizontal lines going this way, which is now forcing our image flow to the left. And the white screen still works really well in embellishing or enhancing that flow, that horizontal flow of the image. I also asked my wife and my son and a couple other people to look at those two frames and figure out, well, what are you looking at? What is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? And where are your eyes going? And they really like the reflection. They really like a lot of things that were happening in a 16:9. But when I asked them, what are you looking at? They would say, well, I'm looking at this reflection. I'm looking at what's going on in the window. I'm looking at those lights. Oh yeah, and then I'm looking at the subject. But when I asked them to do the same thing with the 2.39 shot, they immediately said their eyes was drawn directly to the subject. So there is something about that frame that just focused their attention directly on my subject. It removed some of the distraction. Yes, the reflection looks great on a 16:9, but is it causing a distraction? Is it causing your viewers to, not pay attention to the actual subject? Are those pennant lights, because they are vertical, creating a conflict between the counter, the window, creating all those vertical lines and creating conflict with the actual flow of that frame? So those are things that made me realize that not only is aspect ratio something I need to think about in pre-production to determine how I want my audience to react to my project, but it might be something that also is dictated by how I frame a shot by those lines. But I never really thought about it like I do with lighting or sound design, where everything we do with lighting is to really bring attention and focus to our subject, to differentiate our subject from the background or the foreground, to bring the attention to the person talking on screen. Or if you're not shooting an interview, if you're, whatever scene you're doing, you can use lighting to bring the attention to a specific part of your frame. And we all understand that. We all do that on a daily basis. But to use aspect ratio for that same purpose, I'd never really thought about it. I'd never actually experienced that. And so this was an interesting one to really look at, where are my eyes going and why are they being pushed towards the subject when I remove some of those, some of the top and bottom elements. And looking at lines as, is there a conflict or is there harmony in my shot by removing certain things? So I think that's what this example is about. Again, there's no right or wrong. There's no do it this way because whatever. It's really on a creative side. But I'm always interested, and I think we should always be learning about how do we make our videos a lot more effective, because I'm not doing work for my client just to do work for my client. It needs to produce certain results. And part of that is to understand the psychology of what those images are doing to the viewers. And if I can, quote unquote, manipulate the viewers, bring them to a certain place, make them focus on something, then I'm better for it. My work is then more valuable to my client because it produces results. I think that's the main takeaway is, can we step away from default and can we look at aspect ratio in a more creative way to embellish our images and make our project more effective for our clients? Let me know in the comments on how you use aspect ratio on your projects. If you found this video useful, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and check out my online course on camera settings. Thanks for watching and happy filming.